Nublack yawned from his seat at the station's cafeteria, overlooking the blue planet below. The engineers objected to installing such an extravagant window on what was effectively a science outpost, but ultimately the scientists got their way. The planet was, after all, quite beautiful. It was his first year, Galactic Standard, on the space station. The humans, as they called themselves, were found quite recently, after an incident involving a faulty FTL device and a drunk pilot, and soon after determining they had no means of observing the observation post, the station was built. They were a fairly uninteresting species, standing at about 2/3 the height of the average Daxian, with front-facing eyes and little to no fur, hinting at their past as endurance predators. Their society was primitive, organized into various kingdoms in a near-constant state of dispute, which wasn't uncommon for a civilization at their level of development. His assistant and apprentice, Zorok, came into the cafeteria, looking giddier than usual. He sure seemed to enjoy his time filling out paperwork all day, Nublack thought, but didn't complain, as he was the one being spared the effort by the remarkably diligent junior scientist. "Dr. Nublack?" Zorok said, taking him out of his pensive state. "We think there's a battle brewing. First one we'll actually be able to watch since the engineering boys got the new observatory up." That immediately got Nublack up and heading to the observation room, quickly followed by the apprentice. So far, the only data on the humans they were able to gather were from smuggled probes they sneaked into the atmosphere, which were quickly found out by station security and earned quite a few senior scientists very severe reprimands, due to the Federation's strict no-contact policy regarding pre-space-age species. Poor Kulek got fired for his involvement, and they still kept a non-functioning probe as a memento to remember his brave efforts for the sake of science. Now that the observatory was installed, they had a very clear view of what was happening on the ground, which Nublack was amazed by after waddling through the crowd that was gathered by the news and into the observatory's viewpoint. He could see large formations of humans using curved rectangular shields and a variety of weapons and armor made of metallic alloys. He could also see them thumping on their shields, with mouths wide open, on what he assumed was screaming, not that he could hear it. What came next, however, was the true spectacle. Warfare was, by all means, an ugly business, a fact that all species recognized from early on in their existence, which made it about intimidation rather than a bloodbath. Every species the Daxians had documented thus far, including themselves, did what humans would call peacocking, named after a bird that was, by all means, very silly. The average battle would consist of two armies meeting in a field, followed by various displays of power, until one of them was intimidated into surrender. Very few people would die that way, and everyone agreed it was the best way to fight, even the most aggressive of primitive societies. The humans, however, didn't seem to care much for that philosophy, as Nublack watched with a mixture of shock and awe as the two armies closed in on each other and commenced a bloody affair, tearing each other apart with little regard for common sense. The strangest part, from Nublack's perspective, was how organized the chaos seemed to be. The few instances where fights actually broke out in Daxian history involved little more than a couple units breaking off, hitting each other, then retreating almost immediately upon getting injured, and earning a stern talking to by their commanding officer. This, though, was unlike anything Nublack had ever seen or heard of. Thousands of humans, maintaining formation as they killed one another, even while their unit was under direct attack. Soldiers riding large, frightening creatures coming in to flank the enemy, and rows of people wielding curious contraptions called bows, showering each other with high-speed wooden projectiles. Nublack kept staring, horrified with what he was seeing from the observatory. The event would most certainly be recorded for later viewing, and he concluded he'd have to go over it once again, to take proper notes and do a proper assessment once the shock faded. For now, though, he watched for a solid 2 hours as the conflict went on, neither side seeming to retreat, until one of them finally broke the engagement off and started running away, still maintaining a remarkable amount of coordination and discipline as they did so. As the dust settled, and he got a proper view, the scientist felt nauseated. The sheer amount of human bodies, and their characteristically dark red blood spilled everywhere, was unfathomable. At a surface glance, it already seemed like more death in a single battle than the Daxians had ever seen in conflict over the course of millennia. He also saw humans going through the bodies, picking out the injured and bringing them into various tents, strewn across the outskirts of the battlefield, which New Black found almost comical, given the terrible brutality displayed just a few minutes prior. After what he witnessed, he didn't expect humans to feel empathy, much less treat their injured rather than leaving them to their fate. The silence in the observation room was palpable, interrupted only by the occasional researcher vomiting at the sight of the gore, including poor Zorok. It was clear to them that they got far more than they bargained for by choosing to be stationed on Earth, and reports would need to be sent immediately, detailing what was seen that day. Nublack was the first to get on that, and he made sure to include the part about the medics, as he feared detailing only their brutality could mean the end of the human species. After the scientist's report was submitted, the Federation, after much deliberation, shouting and demands for an immediate and decisive strike on Earth, decided to keep a much closer eye on humanity, realizing they were by no means a regular primitive civilization, but fierce warriors of the kind the galaxy had never before witnessed, and could pose a significant threat if not treated with caution.